Hello, everyone. My name's Laura. I work for hello. I work for Spread the Word, and it's my absolute pleasure today to be talking with Joanna Brown. Joanna was highly commended in our Life Writing Prize 2020 with her exceptional piece of writing, "Birds Can Be Heard Singing Through Open Windows." It is a piece about a daughter's reflection on her relationship with her mother, a meditation through remembered moments. It explores loss, longing, and the ways in which we continue to love and be loved after death. And the prize judge, Sathnam Sanghera, said this about the piece: "I found this story incredibly moving. I had to put it down on 2 occasions to cry. A timely reminder of the heroism that permeates ordinary life and the important role literature can play in highlighting it." So Joanna was raised as an only child. Losing her parents young further fueled obsessive reading and diary writing. A qualified teacher, Joanna facilitates creative writing workshops. Recent work includes the development of the literary education programme Africa Writes Young Voices, linking poets with London school students to explore writing from Africa and the diaspora. She is now immersing herself fully in her own writing practice, unearthing her personal family histories to honour and celebrate unsung Black lives in Britain. Welcome, Joanna. Huge congratulations on being highly commended in the prize. How does that feel?
Completely overwhelming, actually. Absolutely amazing. Like, I'm thrilled, but so surprised. Like, it was really unexpected, but very, very exciting. I feel like it's pushing me as a writer out into a public space where I haven't really been before as someone who writes. So I'm really excited about the possibilities that could open up for me. I'm having sort of new conversations with friends, with family, and with colleagues about the fact that I write, about my writing life. So yeah, this feels like an absolutely, just a wonderful beginning. Thank you.
Fantastic, no, it's a pleasure. Could you tell us a little bit more about Birds Can Be Heard Singing Through Open Windows? How you came to write it and why you wanted to write it?
So it was a piece that I felt I've had to write for many years. I feel like I started writing it many times actually over the course of years. So the events that take place within the events the story tells about actually took place about 30 years ago. And I felt recently that I really wanted to find a way to honour my mother and kind of celebrate her memory. And I was conscious that I kept going back to this sort of particular moment, I suppose this kind of difficult moment of her death and how that came about. And in a way, initially, when I was trying to write that, I kept kind of getting stuck. And then over time, I found ways to sit with that moment and really sort of get inside it and begin to understand it more, really, I think, through remembering particular experiences that I've had with her, particular moments in our sort of shared life together. So that the writing of the piece itself became a process that helped me to understand that past moment much more clearly, with much more clarity.
Fantastic. Would you like to share a piece of it now with us?
Yes, I would love to read an extract. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's been years since you and I took a bus together. You're just not well enough anymore. We used to take trips into town. Uptown, you called it. Oxford Street, shopping. When I was small, I'd hold your hand from the minute we left the house until we returned, or so it seemed. You bought perfumes, watches, handbags from men who shouted from their cardboard box mountains on the street, preachers of thrift. You were a devout worshipper, chatting, cajoling, chastising, charming, bantering and bartering until you triumphed and had exactly what you wanted for just the right price. Once we were weaving in and out of the crowds as usual, I hurried to keep up with your determined stride as you pulled me along. I was 6, I think. We were heading towards a crowd on the edge of the pavement. Men and women were standing in the road. I thought they were buying handbags. But you could see something I couldn't. Hang on, darling, you said, and you let go of my hand. I took a deep breath as you disappeared into the crowd. People closed around you like water closing over my head. I pushed my way through the forest of legs and emerged breathless to find you kneeling next to a woman lying on her side in the road. You had your ear to her mouth. Her blonde hair was matted with blood. A few meters away, a bike, its front wheel twisted. People were muttering about a taxi. You were pulling a scarf from around your neck and making a cushion for her head. You were cutting clothes from her with your scissors. The crowd continued to jostle and push, watching, murmuring. No one moved to help. Their muttering buzzed in my ears, irritating, menacing. You were bent low over the lying down woman. Your lips were moving, but I could not hear what you were saying. When the ambulance arrived, the crew jumped out in their boxy uniforms and black boots. They joined you on the ground next to her and started asking you questions. I wanted to be over there with them, with you, helping. Instead, I was in a crowd of bystanders. When the crew had strapped the woman with bloodied hair to the metal bed and rolled it into the back of the waiting vehicle, they thanked you. As the crowd dispersed, your eyes found me. You smiled at me and made your way towards me. Your hands were covered in blood. I watched, blinking away tears as you took tissues out of your bag and cleaned your fingers. You knelt down in front of me with your arms outstretched, mine again, and all my fear fell away like black feathers from a fairy tale ending. I threw my arms around you and buried my face in your neck. Your heavy perfume filled my nose, a wave of relief. As I sobbed into the sweet warmth of you, pride rose like a lump in my throat, threatening to choke me.
Thank you for an exceptional reading of an exceptional piece of writing. Thank you. I'm going to carry on with the questions now, if that's okay. My next question sort of we're going to sort of zoom out a little bit, and I'd love to know about your writing, and so how long you've been writing for, and maybe why you write as well.
So in a sense, so I talked about this journey as being, I think, a beginning for me, and it is very much in terms of my life as a professional writer. This feels like a start. But I have been writing for as long as I can remember, genuinely. I've been filling diaries and notebooks since I was about 12, or at least the ones that I still have date back to when I was 12 years old. And over the course of my life...
Do you ever reread your diaries? Sorry, just a little aside. Do you?
Yeah, very much so, yeah. And I kept a diary actually sort of around this time of this moment I was talking about. There were then sort of gaps, and I'm always curious about those gaps actually, where I've suddenly left things alone for a few months. And recently I've tried to be a bit more systematic. So I've actually started going through my diaries and popping in sort of post-it notes with notes about what's sort of in there. So I think I'm going to be writing more about my mum, for example. So I'm just kind of like spotting kind of like, moments where I've gone back to writing about that, or my own sort of development as a mother, or just different kind of aspects of my life, trying to find the story, I suppose, trying to find the sort of common thread in this huge morass of sort of material, because at the time of writing it was very much of it is very much a kind of spilling, not very sort of selective necessarily. So now I'm starting to go back and select that material and try and curate it a bit more carefully.
Fantastic. Oh, thank you. And so are you working on a a bigger piece about your life? Is that the aim?
So I've got a couple of different projects that I'm working on, and I think one of the things that will be really interesting for me in terms of the relationship with Spread the Word will be to see how I develop this work. I'm working on a collection of short stories, so they are fictional stories, but each story is kind of growing out of a kernel of either a childhood experience or a particular sort of memory. And I'm hoping that the stories will work together as a collection to start to tell perhaps a slightly broader, slightly more universal kind of look at, again, a sort of Black British history. So as part of that work, I'm also doing some family history research. I've recently made some interesting discoveries about my mother's own family, who are from Sierra Leone. But I've recently discovered actually we're travelling backwards and forwards between West Africa and England since the late 19th century. So that's some work that I'm really hoping to develop in more depth.
Fantastic. Thank you. Do you have any tips for budding life writers out there? I mean, you've had some amazing tips already through your diaries and how you sort of curating those. That's fantastic. But do you have other tips?
So I think it's an interesting one with life writing, because I think for a while I was a little bit hesitant, about sort of writing about my own life or thinking about what I might do with that sort of, or writing it publicly, let's say, or putting my work out into the public sphere, because I sort of thought, well, why would anyone want to read about me or my life if they didn't know me? Like, how would that sort of feel important or relevant to somebody else? And I've realised that it's really not about that, but it's about finding the truth in your own experience and sharing that in a way that makes it meaningful to somebody else, that makes it relevant. So sort of trying to find that point of connection.
Yeah.
So one thing that I would say is, sort of be aware of that. I think there's something very sort of democratic, really, about all writing, in that one's own writing is simply, on one level, a way of sharing one's own perspective, one's own way of seeing the world, and no one person's view or perspective is any more or less important than any other person's. I think it's about a way of building up through these sharings a sort of a form of sort of mutual empathy, like shared empathy. And sort of craft-wise, I read a really good piece of advice relatively recently, a few months ago, and I don't even remember who it was. I feel bad, but they said always be prepared for your writing to sort of be bad or to sound bad. And for me, that was huge, because actually I'm a bit of a perfectionist, and I think I was sort of holding back from the idea of even letting the writing sit in a certain way. And I've realised that what I can do is write too much. I'm too wordy. I sort of churn out lots of prose, and actually the voice comes for me in the editing. So I edit and edit and edit and edit, because for me the voice is really important. How it sounds is really important. But I think it was that moment of realising not to be afraid of seeing your words on the page or hearing your words perhaps not yet sounding as you might want them to. Is just a part of the process. It's the process.
Yeah, I had a great expression for that once, which was running the tap. You sort of run the tap and let all the gunk come out before the water runs clear and good.
I love that.
Yeah, that's really helpful. I'm always just running the tap with my writing.
Excellent. I love it.
Yeah. Joanna, my final question for you today is, who are your writing inspirations?
Okay, so obviously so many, and in a way it sort of changes over time, doesn't it? Where we sort of find our influences from at particular moments in our life. But I think I would have to say, like, if there is some kind of like writing heaven, I have this sort of view of these two sort of almost godlike figures, like my sort of Zeus and Hera figures are James Baldwin and Toni Morrison. I think, again, so I'm a great music lover. I really love like jazz and blues, and so for me, I'm drawn to voices that have a strong sense of musicality, rhythm, cadence, poetry. I'm also really drawn to poetry. So my work at Africa Writes, I was really sort of fortunate to suddenly find myself amongst lots of contemporary young poets working at the moment, and lots of spoken word poetry. And I think, again, in terms of sort of developing that sense of voice, hearing poetry spoken aloud was really important for me. I'm reading some short stories at the moment by a writer called Toni Cade Bambara, an African American woman whose work was edited actually by Toni Morrison, and she really plays with persona and voice. And I love that sense of short fiction, almost as dramatic monologue. The idea that you're kind of suddenly in somebody else's head, in a particular moment in their life. And Jackie Kay, for that as well. You can really tell she's a poet when you read her stories. That kind of that lyrical voice, but also that kind of compression. I think she does beautifully.
Yeah, as do you. I think I can really tell there's a real sense of movement and poetry in your work. And for people watching this, you will be able to read Joanna's wonderful, wonderful piece in the Life Writing Prize 2020 anthology, which is available on the Spread the Word website. And you'll also be able to see Joanna reading another part of the piece in a video reading that she's very kindly recorded for us, and is on our website as well. It's spreadtheword.org.uk. So I think that leaves me to thank you ever so much, Joanna, and to thank Michelle as well, our wonderful BSL interpreter. Thank you so much for a really wonderful conversation, and huge congratulations. And thank you so much for submitting to the prize and for sharing your wonderful, wonderful words with the world. I think many people will find it incredibly beautiful and hopeful and moving, and I think it will resonate with so many readers. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. Genuinely, like I say, it feels like such an honour, and I'm really, really excited about that, what that means for me in terms of developing my work with Spread the Word. So thank you ever so much, truly, and thank you, Michelle, as well. Thank you. Thank you.